Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation, What Providers Need to Know, New Medication Options and Policy Trends in Behavioral Health. Today's executive web briefing is brought to you by Open Minds and Genoa Healthcare. And we are joined this afternoon by Stephanie Kornechuk, Senior Vice President of Procurement at Genoa Healthcare. She joined the organization in 2003 as a pharmacy manager and has held numerous leadership positions since then. And prior to that, she was a hospital pharmacist at St. Joseph Medical Center in Tacoma, Washington. During our time together today, we're going to be discussing new and upcoming treatment options for mental illness and provide an overview of newly approved medications and those pending approval in the pipeline. Dr. Kornechuk will also discuss pending policy changes that may improve accessibility to cutting-edge medication for opioid disorder. Now, you may notice that all of the attendees have been muted. We do this to assure the highest quality of sound for our recording today. And we are going to encourage you to submit questions at any point in time throughout the question panel on your GoToWebinar dashboard. So with that, I will go ahead and pass things on over to Stephanie.
Thanks, Brittany. Before we begin, I'd like to start with a poll. Let's launch our poll. What is your approach to adopting new treatment options as they are approved by the FDA? Is it a wait and see approach? Do you try it on a few clients or consumers to see how it works? Do you try it for those who have failed a current treatment? Or do you adopt it as part of your toolbox? What is your answer? Select one. Curious to see what happens here. Okay, and the results, a wait and see approach, 60%. That's interesting. I like those results. Okay. So before we get into the details of the presentation, I thought it might be helpful to give you a brief overview of the drug approval process in the US. So the FDA Center for Drug Evaluation and Research evaluates new drugs before they can be distributed. It ensures that drugs are effective and that their health benefits outweigh their known risks. So there's three general stages to drug approval in the US. The first one is called the preclinical stage. That is before any testing is done on humans. The drug sponsor develops a new drug compound, then they have to test it on animals for toxicity, and they use multiple species to gather information on the safety and efficacy of the compound being investigated. Then they have to submit what's called an investigational new drug application to the FDA based on the results from their preclinical testing that include what the drug's made of, how they're going to manufacture it, and then what their plan is for testing it on humans. And then the next phase of drug approval is the clinical phase, and this is divided into three different testing phases based on the number of humans that we're testing it on. So there's three phases. There's a phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3, where you have a few people and then more people and then a larger group of those who are being studied. So that's the different phases. And then once the drug sponsors completed their phase 1, 2, and 3 trials, then they're ready to submit their new drug application. And that involves several steps that are kind of outlined on the slides, but it's basically they submit the information to the FDA and it gets reviewed and then approved. So this process can take a number of years depending on the outcome of the study, whether or not they have to go back and do more studies to prove that the compound works. So that's kind of how drugs are approved in the US. This 10-year graph shows that from 2011 through 2020, the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research has averaged about 40 new drug approvals per year. In 2020, despite several challenges from COVID-19, many new drug therapies were approved to help a wide range of patients suffering from many different medical conditions to gain new hope for improved quality of life. and in some cases, improve chances of surviving life-threatening illnesses. Many of these new drug therapies were approved for patients with rare diseases, which span a broad spectrum of disease categories. In 2020, there were over 150 new drug applications evaluated by the FDA, and 53 of these were approved. 11 are potential blockbusters, which means they have expected sales of over $1 billion annually in the US. And of the 53 novel drugs approved in 2020, 21 of them were approved as first in class, which means they have a mechanism of action that's different from anything else that's out there approved already. So these drugs are important because they have potential for strong positive impact on the health of the American people. And then also of the 53 approved drugs, 31 were approved to treat rare orphan diseases, and those are diseases that affect less than 200,000 Americans. These are the categories that those 53 drugs approved in 2020 fell into. And you can see that the vast majority of them are in the oncology space. This includes tests for detecting different forms of cancer as well. And this is a trend that has been in existence for a few years, and we expect this to continue because the oncology space really is evolving rapidly with targeted approaches to your own cancer based on DNA research. So it's kind of an area of active investigation by most manufacturers. So far in 2021, we've actually had 26 new drug approvals, the vast majority of them still in oncology and immunotherapy. The most recent approval, and probably the most controversial, which one that I'm not going to actually talk about today too much, but Aduhelm for the treatment of Alzheimer's disease was approved through a fast track designation. I'm not going to review it in too much depth, but it's making a lot of news story headlines because it costs $56,000 per patient per year. And it did demonstrate a reduction of amyloid beta plaque formation, but what it did not demonstrate yet is whether or not that leads to a clinical benefit. So the FDA, they approved it, but they also requested that the manufacturer complete what's called a phase 4 study, which is post-launch, to verify this clinical benefit. If the clinical benefit is not shown in the phase 4 study, then the FDA might remove the product from approval. So it's really interesting. There's 6 million Americans suffering from Alzheimer's disease in the US. So, and there hasn't been anything launched recently, and nothing has ever launched that actually slows the progression of the disease. And then what's interesting too is last Friday, Eli Lilly announced that they're going to seek FDA approval for their Alzheimer's drug, donanemab, based on the results of their phase 2 trial. And they did demonstrate in that phase 2 trial, which would be a smaller, less important trial, but not a phase 3 trial. But they did demonstrate that the drug slowed decline in memory and the ability to perform daily activities of living by 32% in subjects over 18 months. So they're still doing their phase 3 study, but they're going to seek early approval from the FDA based on the results of their phase 2 study. So that's exciting, 2 new approaches to therapy for Alzheimer's. I thought I would give you that information because it's making a lot of news headlines. If you treat each one of those 6 million patients who have Alzheimer's, annually the cost is $350 billion. So this has become a topic of a lot of conversation because who is going to pay for that? All right, now we will move on to our drugs that we're going to talk about in depth today. The first one is called Kelbri. It's viloxazine, and it is manufactured by Supernus. I believe that's their first product that they have approval, and it's been approved for ADHD in pediatric patients 6 to 17 years old. And it's unique because it's the first drug approved for ADHD that is a selective norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor. So you may be familiar with that term as an antidepressant. So now they're using an antidepressant to treat ADHD. So it's a non-stimulant drug. It's a capsule. If you can't swallow it whole, you can open it up, put it on food, which is good for kids who can't always swallow capsules. Their phase 3 data demonstrated significantly improved results on the ADHD investigator symptom rating scale compared to placebo. So it was a 6-week trial, and it showed an improvement of minus 15.5 from baseline in the scores compared to minus 11.7 for those who were in the placebo arm, and that was statistically significant enough to get approval from the FDA. So right now it's approved for children 6 to 17. They're going to be seeking approval in adults in the second half of 2021. So this product's already on the market. It costs about $10 per capsule, so fairly expensive when you think of the other options that are out there that are genericized already and are, you know, less than $40 for a month's supply. It does also have a black box warning since it is an antidepressant for suicidal thoughts and behaviors. And some of the side effects are that it can increase heart rate and blood pressure, and there are quite a few drug interactions. So, but it is on the market already. And the next drug that we're going to look at, also for ADHD, is called Escaris, which is a combination of Ceres dexmethylphenidate and dexmethylphenidate. So you may be familiar with dexmethylphenidate already, or methylphenidate, Ritalin. And this is an interesting product because the Ceres dexmethylphenidate is a prodrug. So where we're trying to, with ADHD, we're trying to make the duration of activity for the drug last all day, during the day, and then sort of wear off at night so that the person can sleep. So that's what this does. So the Ceres dexmethylphenidate is the long-acting portion, and then the dexmethylphenidate is the immediate acting portion. So it was approved for those 6 years and older, so adults included. It's still once a day, same type of thing. It's a capsule that can be opened and sprinkled in applesauce or food once a day in the morning. And it was approved via a different pathway. It's called a 505(b)(2) pathway, which means that they're using some of the scientific evidence from methylphenidate to get approval, because they don't have to really start from scratch, because it's technically not a new compound. So that's interesting. The other thing that's interesting about this is that it is going to be a controlled substance. The dexmethylphenidate has historically been a C2. This was originally thought that it was going to be a C2, but they have applied, and it's likely going to be a C4, so less restrictions in terms of prescribing. So that could be a good thing as well. It will be commercially available in the second half of 2021. It does have a black box warning for abuse and dependence, though. Now, the next product is, this was approved at the end of May, Alkermes' Libalvi, which is olanzapine, and we're all familiar with olanzapine, co-formulated with samidorphan, which is an opioid antagonist. So this is approved for treatment of schizophrenia, manic or mixed episodes associated with bipolar 1 disorder as a monotherapy or as an adjunct to lithium or valproate. Lots of indications, and also for maintenance treatment of bipolar 1. So what happens here is the samidorphan reduces the weight gain associated with olanzapine. And their study was called the Enlighten-2 study, where it compared those with Libalvi and those with olanzapine alone. And the olanzapine alone had a 57% higher weight gain from baseline compared to the combination. And olanzapine had twice the risk of gaining 10% or more of baseline body weight compared to the patients on Libalvi. So basically, this is an option for those that we know olanzapine works in and who have had significant weight gain or a potential risk for weight gain from olanzapine. It's dosed once a day, 4 different strengths, so a lot of flexibility in dosing there. So it was approved on May 28th, and they're looking at launching in October. So that's an interesting product. We know that olanzapine is a very effective antipsychotic, and so we're looking forward to seeing what the market share of this one might be, just because of the significant weight gain associated with olanzapine. So now we're going to transition from recently approved medications to some that are up and coming. And so Brexadi is going to be another option to Sublicate. So it's buprenorphine, an extended release injection. It's sub-Q. The difference between Brexadi and Sublicate is that Brexadi is once a week or once a month, 2 dosing options. There's going to be, I think, 7 or 8 strengths. that they'll be having, and it doesn't have to be refrigerated. Still has that significant REMS program that's associated with the buprenorphine long-acting injection, but the fact that it doesn't have to be refrigerated does make it a lot easier to handle from a storage capacity standpoint. Their technology is called the fluid crystal injection depot technology. So as soon as the injection gets in the contact with the subcutaneous tissue, it sort of forms a gel, just like the Sublicate becomes like a little hard mass that you can feel under there. This is more like a gel, probably won't feel as much, and then it just releases the buprenorphine slowly over time. Still going to be a schedule controlled 3, but is going to be another option for those who might want to have a more frequent dosage distribution. In November, Janssen announced the submission of what's called a supplemental new drug application to the FDA for paliperidone palmitate 6-month injection. They're calling it half Eura, so creative, and it's going to be indicated for those with schizophrenia. So it will be the first and only long-acting injectable schizophrenia medication with a twice-yearly dosing regimen. And this will be approved based on what's called the Route 6 study. It's a randomized, double-blind, non-inferiority phase 3 global study. And what all it has to do is demonstrate that it's not inferior to what's currently on the market, which is Invega Sustenna and Invega Trinza. So that's what they did. And during the trial, they looked at people for 12 months, and as long as it was a non-inferior result, the primary endpoint being relapse at the end of the 12 months, and they had no additional safety signals coming out of that trial. So we expect that this will probably be approved later on this year with a launch in second quarter of 2022. The big question with this medication, not for me really, isn't is it going to work or not? It's how are we going to pay for it? Because from the pharmacy benefit side, there's no contract that pharmacies have that will allow for a payment for a product that's a 6-month day supply. So is it going to be a medical benefit? Is it going to be a pharmacy benefit somehow? And so to me, that's the biggest question with this. It'll be expensive because we know that Invega Trinza itself is about $5,000 a month or for the 3 months. So this will be easily double that. So getting, the approval from the third parties is going to be interesting. So to me, that's going to be an interesting piece of this one. This drug is CEP856 or Ulotaront by Synovian. This one is really exciting. They are currently in their phase 2 trial, has been completed, and they're doing their phase 3 trial right now. And they published the phase 2 data in the New England Journal in April of 2020. It does have breakthrough status, so we could see it get approved a little bit faster than the traditional medication approval rate. And because it has a unique receptor activity, it's trace amine associated receptor 1 agonist activity. So TAR is what they're calling it. And every antipsychotic that's been approved so far targets dopamine receptors, and then the newer ones target serotonin as well. This is a completely new mechanism of action. It stays away from the dopamine 2 receptor antagonism, and that's what causes a movement disorder. So since this doesn't bind to the D2 receptor or the serotonin 2A receptor, we don't have any of those side effects. It's a really interesting concept and something totally new. So I'm really excited about this one, actually. We see no side effects that are associated with movement disorders or hyperprolactinemia, which we usually see when we're looking at D2 antagonism. So common side effects: somnolence, agitation, nausea, vomiting, no elevation in prolactin, no impact on weight, cholesterol, hemoglobin A1C. So this is going to be really interesting when it comes out. Dosage is 50 to 75 milligrams a day. Appears to work on both the positive and negative symptoms of schizophrenia. So this one to me is really exciting. They're looking at launching in January 2023. So keep your eyes open for that one. I just want to revisit this approval from March 2020. It kind of came out in the middle, the beginning of COVID and our massive shutdowns. Capleida Indicated for treatment of schizophrenia in adults, really easy dosing, 42 milligrams once a day with food. It's no titration. It's got a good safety profile. It still targets the serotonin receptors and dopamine receptors. So we do have the risk of the extrapyramidal side effects and all the other, but it does seem to be better tolerated and has fewer incidents of that compared to placebo. People actually lost weight when they took this medication, 4 to 7 pounds. So I encourage you to sort of take a look at this one if you're looking for an option for someone that might have some of those side effect potentials. Somnolence was predominantly mild in this one as well. So if you're not familiar with Capleida, take a look at the website, and it could be a good option for some patients. All right, so now new results from a clinical trial using MDMA to treat post-traumatic stress disorder showed the promise of this stigmatized drug to treat mental illness at a time when COVID-19 raised global awareness of the toll of mental health conditions. So companies like Compass Pathways, which uses psilocybin for depression, and Atai Life Sciences, they're researching various ways to treat mental health with alternate or psychedelic therapies. We've decriminalized drugs like magic mushrooms in Denver and in Oregon. It may lead to broader public acceptance, and the emerging alternative drug industry is focused on patients most in need where current psychiatric medications have failed. So possibly indicated for MDD and PTSD, thought to impact mood via impact on serotonin. Small clinical trials have demonstrated efficacy in depression for psilocybin. 50% reduction in MDD symptoms after 4 weeks was demonstrated in one phase 3 trial. There was a phase 2 trial that compared it to escitalopram. It showed more rapid improvement, but that effect narrowed over time, though it did demonstrate superiority on ancillary outcomes like how do you feel, your social functioning, ability to express emotion. So it's interesting. MDMA, it might also cause depression, anxiety, and panic attacks. So I just thought I would mention this because we're seeing some of it in the news and patients may be hearing about it and coming to you with questions. So I just wanted to raise awareness of this. Not that anybody's going to be moving towards this anytime soon, but I thought would at least inform you about it. All right, so now I'm just going to talk about some policy updates as it pertains to buprenorphine. You may have heard about this, but more than 83,000 drug overdose deaths occurred in the US in the 12 months ending June 2020, which is the highest number of overdose deaths ever recorded in a 12-month period, which is an increase of over 21% compared to the previous year. And this was released by the CDC. And as a result of that, effective April 28th this year, practitioners who are licensed under state law who possess a DEA registration, they're exempt from the certification requirements related to training, counseling, and other ancillary services that are currently required in order to prescribe buprenorphine for opioid use disorder treatment. So physicians utilizing this exemption can treat no more than 30 patients at a time, and it has to be buprenorphine for opioid use disorder. And the exemption only applies to those prescription drugs or formulations covered under the X waiver of the Controlled Substances Act, like buprenorphine. So it doesn't cover methadone for treatment of OUD. These prescribers still have to submit an application designated as a notice of intent, and they also still need to have an X DEA number. So it just removes the requirement to provide all of those counseling services. I think this is exciting because now you've got an option if your practice is small and you don't have the ability to have those side counseling services for opioid use disorder, that you can put someone on buprenorphine as long as you're only treating up to 30 patients at a time. Now at Genoa, while our pharmacies have been open throughout COVID, we have currently still about 80 clinic locations that are not fully open. Let's get a sense of what the audience is planning to do as far as reopening your centers go. So let's launch poll number 2. What are your organization's plans this summer for bringing staff back into your center? We're 100% back already. We hope to mostly be back by Labor Day. We're 50-50 in-person and telehealth. We plan to stay that way. And we've shifted permanently to mostly telehealth. Are you back? You're trying to come back. We're 50-50, or we're moving towards telehealth, and we're going to stay there. I know our offices are sort of opening, our corporate offices are opening again here soon. So we're excited to get back in the office. Okay, let's see what the poll says. Oh, really even split. So 30% back, 24% Labor Day, 50-50, and then 10%. That's interesting. Thanks for sharing. Let's go to the next slide. So speaking of telehealth, I know this is a busy slide. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw telehealth emerge as a significant tool in managing treatment for those with a behavioral health or substance use disorder. So if you look at the right side of the graph, telehealth visits increased by over 3,500% during the pandemic. Some significant barriers to providing it were removed during the pandemic, and reimbursements for services provided via telehealth increased. And I think that is still in place for now. The percentage of visits being conducted via telehealth is starting to fall off now, but still you can see 1,500% over baseline. Though when you look at, we started at a baseline of 0, any increase is substantial. So if you look at the left side of the graph, office visits, institutional visits are still 20 to 30% below the pre-pandemic level. And that's kind of the green and yellow lines. That's the office visits and the institutional visits. So they went up and down during the pandemic, kind of leveled off, are decreasing a little bit now on the institutional side, but still below the baseline. So people haven't really gone back to visiting their doctors 100% yet. And we think that 40% is still telehealth on the behavioral health side. We're seeing a significant increase in that. So while there's some advantages to telemedicine services in psychiatry, it's easier access, better patient engagement, improved satisfaction, there are some cons to consider. Technology challenges, questions regarding privacy, lack of standardization and provision of care, and then lack of clinical studies demonstrating non-inferiority of home-based telepsychiatry remain important considerations when providing telemedicine services. Is telehealth here to stay? Most definitely. What remains to be seen is the extent it will be incorporated into clinical practice going forward. So what was the impact of COVID-19 infection on those with a severe mental illness? We know that risk factors associated with poor outcomes from COVID-19 infection include older age, male sex, cardiovascular disease and diabetes, possibly socioeconomic status and race. We also know that there's an increased incidence of COVID-19 among individuals with behavioral health disorders, particularly depression and schizophrenia. But is there an associated increase in mortality? So to answer that question, there was a retrospective cohort study of adults with a history of schizophrenia spectrum disorder, mood disorder, or anxiety disorder who had tested positive for COVID-19. They were compared with a reference group without these premorbid conditions for potential impact on mortality. So after adjusting for demographic and medical risk factors, a diagnosis of schizophrenia spectrum disorder, regardless of time since diagnosis, was associated with a 2.67 times the odds for mortality with COVID-19. Interesting, the diagnosis of mood or anxiety disorder was not associated with an increased risk of mortality associated with COVID-19 infection. So the results of this study suggests a need for enhanced monitoring and targeted intervention to prevent adverse outcomes from COVID-19 in patients with schizophrenia. And so this diagnosis ranked only behind age in strength of association with mortality compared to everything else. So if you think of someone who is potentially at risk for having a severe reaction or being in the hospital, being on a vent, or dying from COVID-19, those with schizophrenia and those types of diagnoses are definitely at increased risk. So what is the role of the behavioral health provider in COVID-19 vaccination? So since it looks like those with a schizophrenia spectrum disorder have a higher mortality from COVID infection, the role of vaccination in this population is especially important. We know that since many of our clinics have been closed during the pandemic, and now that things are reopening, we need to make sure we're reaching all our consumers to offer them access to the vaccine and then address any hesitancy that they have. Those with SUD and SMI are not only at an increased risk of contracting COVID-19, but they're also more likely to be hospitalized and experience serious complications from COVID. So despite obvious benefit to these individuals and their communities in preventing the spread of disease, low socioeconomic status, reduced access to medical care, and a mistrust in medical institutions does create barriers to this population receiving the vaccine. And they have less access to preventative care and vaccinations in general, which foreshadows the inequitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. So how can behavioral health providers, including Genoa healthcare pharmacists, educate our patients about COVID-19 vaccines? We're frequently the single trusted point of contact between those experiencing mental illness and the general medical system. So we are sort of the hands and feet of the medical system and what it represents to these patients. So we need to actively engage with them on this topic, discuss vaccine-related concerns, share accurate information with them. Genoa healthcare pharmacists are administering the vaccine, and we're acting as vaccine ambassadors, promoting uptake of vaccination and removing barriers. So we've got over 300 pharmacies who have been administering the vaccine to, I think we've given about 105,000 doses across the country right now. So our pharmacists are currently reaching out to all our consumers to ask them, are they vaccinated, offering to have clinics, have them come in, get their vaccine. So we encourage you to partner with your Genoa pharmacist if you have one. And if you don't, you can go visit our website, genoahealthcare.com, find a Genoa near you, and tell them that you need them to come and do a vaccine clinic for you, for your consumers. We also have a dedicated email address for any vaccine-related information. I'm going to share that on the next slide, and 2 slides actually. So I think we're all looking forward sort of to giving back to normal, or what the new normal looks like, spending time with friends and family again, even getting back to traveling. So what are your plans for the summer? Are you going to go on vacation? Are you still a little bit hesitant? Are you trying to you have young kids at home who aren't vaccinated, so you're concerned about their health and safety? Just wanted to sort of put that out there. And I know myself, I am fully vaccinated, as most of you probably are. And it's been so nice to get back to a little bit of normal life. I live in Washington State, and as of tomorrow, the state's opening back up, no restrictions. So I can't wait to go to a restaurant that's fully open and get back to normal. So with that, we will go over to our Q&A part of the webinar. There's our website and the email address for any COVID-19 vaccine questions. If you have a question, put it in the chat window. I think it's the chat window, the Q&A, right? Q&A and chat window, and either one, and we'll do our best to answer them. So I have Kevin in the room with me, who's been driving the slides for me, and he's going to screen the questions and pass them over.
All right, so we do have a few questions that came in already.
Okay.
The first one is, what trends are you seeing in your clinics in terms of providers using long-acting injectables?
So we, all of our pharmacists are able to give long-acting injectables. During the COVID pandemic, we did see a small shift away from long-acting injectables as people were hesitant to come in, but we're seeing that reverse now. And long-acting injectables is, I would say, a mainstay of therapy that we provide, because they have been demonstrated to improve long-term outcomes. So even though they're more expensive, and we're going to publish a study here very shortly, which demonstrates that having a Genoa pharmacy and having patients fill prescriptions from a Genoa pharmacy actually leads to lower total cost of care. We're updating a study that we did in 2016, 2015. And even though the medication costs are higher from a Genoa because of the long-acting injections, it still does save overall total cost of care. So it's a mainstay the treatment guidelines coming out of Texas and National Council demonstrate that they are supposed to be thought of as, a first-line therapy. And the sooner you can get someone on a long-acting injection, the better their outcome is going forward. So don't wait till someone's been diagnosed for 10 or 15 years. It's better to consider giving an LAI early on in therapy.
Great. I knew there was going to be a COVID question, and there is. When are COVID booster shots going to be available, and will Genoa be able to provide them?
So I'll answer the second part of that first. Genoa will be able to provide COVID booster shots. And what we know now is that the studies have demonstrated 6 months of continued protection from COVID. And there are ongoing trials. I know that NIH is doing one right now with Moderna and the booster. So giving a Moderna shot as a booster, regardless of what you got as your original vaccine. So as the results of those trials come out, then we'll have a better idea. My assumption is that we'll start having to give boosters in the winter. And I think going forward, what it will be was every fall when you get your flu vaccine, you'll probably get your COVID booster shot. But I would anticipate by the end of the year, we'll be giving boosters, at least to those who got vaccine in December of 2020.
Great. Another question came in. A number of prescribers at our clinic are expressing concerns about using Sublicate. What are your thoughts on this product?
I think Sublicate is a good product in a certain situations. Right now, I mean, maybe they could clarify what the concerns are. Is it the REMS program? Is it the fact that it's only once a month and so you don't see the patients regularly? It does lower the abuse potential. So the fact that you don't have, buprenorphine tablets that you have to worry about where they're going, making sure that patients take them, that they're getting the Sublicate regularly, so that they've got product on board. So I'm not quite sure what the concern is there. Haven't seen any triggers or any safety concerns with the product. So maybe you could clarify the question a little bit.
Yeah, if you have a follow-up question, actually that just came in, some of the side effects risk that have been expressed.
In terms of the injection site reactions or things like that, I'll have to go back and maybe see what the side effects are that would be different from the oral to the injection. But we haven't seen anything like that. We have about 100 locations dispensing Sublicate now, and nothing's really come to light in terms of additional side effects from Sublicate. Most people are really happy with it.
Okay, another COVID-related question. With many other products throughout COVID, there's experiences of pipeline delays. Are you seeing any of these within new medications or existing medications?
I think the approval rate for 2020, 2021 by the FDA is going to remain fairly strong. What we did see during, I would say, late spring last year was a shortage of generics because of the pandemic hitting China and then India, where these generic products are made, and then the shipping delays. So I don't know, most of you probably visit Starbucks and you know that there's a shortage of certain Starbucks products right now. We did have that on the generic space last year. We haven't really seen it on the brand side, but we definitely experienced it on the generic side. As a result, a lot of the manufacturers increased their safety stock. That's what they keep in emergencies. And have been doing that over the past year. In addition, most of the generic manufacturers are increasing the amount of product that they keep in the US. So historically, they may have only kept a month's supply. Now they're keeping 90 days supply to try and alleviate any of those in the future. But yeah, we did see generic issues last year for sure.
With the numerous new products that you went over in the webinar, if a consumer or client need to try a new product, what resources are available for them if cost is an issue?
So if they have insurance, most of these products have, and they have a high copay, say they have an employer plan, a commercial plan, all of these products would have a copay reduction card. So that will bring the copay down. Usually it's under $50. If the person is uninsured, then all of these programs, all these products have a patient assistance program as a method for providing free medication to try. They would also have samples, bridge therapy programs while you're waiting for the approval to come from your insurance if there's a prior authorization. And then if there's a high copay from a Medicare Part D as in dog plan, then there are foundation assistance programs available to help with that. So I think there's quite a few options for those looking to try some of these new medications.
So this is a good follow-up to that one. Many new medications are underused within our practice because of the prior authorization process. What recommendations could you give to improve the success?
I would say if you're not signed up with Cover My Meds, make sure you do that, because that's an easy way for the pharmacy who has the prior auth approval process that we can get started. We can send it over to you, and it's all electronic. You can log in and complete the prior auth and send it over to the third party. That is the fastest way to get a prior auth approved, is to use Cover My Meds. There's other programs out there as well, I think, but Cover My Meds is the one that we use. So that's the best way. Make sure you're communicating, if you have a Genoa pharmacist, with that process as well.
Just a reminder, if you do have questions, please enter them into the question box. We have a few more minutes here to answer some questions.
Nothing else popping in?
Are you seeing any new medications on the horizon for treating alcohol addiction?
Oh, you know, I didn't look at that one specifically. I can look, though. I can look at clinicaltrials.gov is where you find all of the up and coming trials, but I'll look at that one. If you want to find out who that is, put your email address in, we can look at that.
Yeah, and just as LAI administration has gone down, same with Vivitrol.
Yes.
Many states are allowing pharmacists to administer Vivitrol now as well.
Yeah, true. So Vivitrol is an option. We have seen like an anti-abuse shortage periodically on and off. So that has happened for as long as I can remember. There's only one manufacturer of that generic medication.
We've got a couple of these coming in. Great presentation. Will the slides be available to us?
I can't see why not. Yeah, I think marketing can probably do that for you. We'll let you know. Open Minds can send out a communication with the link to the slides. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing proprietary on here.
Okay, that appears to be the end of the questions.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. If you have questions, actually, if you have a question that you want to get to me specifically, you can send it to that vaccine email address and they'll find me. They know where I am. I'm not the vaccine queen anymore, but someone else can find me. Thanks for joining. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day and try and stay cool. Most of the country is extremely hot right now. So have a great day. Thanks, everyone. Bye.